Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we proceed out of order for a moment of personal privilege.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The Senate will proceed out of order for a moment of personal privilege. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This weekend, we lost a giant. As pure of a human as they make. A true public servant. The news of Pat Teegarden was, I think for all of us, a punch in the gut. And there isn't anyone, I think, that didn't hear the news and wasn't completely devastated when they heard it. When I think of Pat, one word immediately comes to mind for me, and that's helper. He was, I think, for so many of us, for so many people that probably never met him, probably didn't even know he was helping them. He was their helper. He cared about others, not because of how they could be used to advance his agenda or his interests, but he actually just cared about others. That's who Pat was. And I think we all know, for any of us who had side conversations with Pat, he didn't just care about us, he cared about our families, even if he had never met them. I was thinking this weekend, politics can be a pretty strange place to work in. It can be a self-serving little world that we live in. But every once in a while you run across someone who is actually just here for entirely the right reasons. And that was Pat. It was never about his ego or about him. It was never about power. It was about helping people. That's what he did every single day. I think there's not a soul that interacted with Pat Teegarden who didn't leave that interaction feeling better. He was a jokester. He always had a smile on his face, and he always cared and was wanting to help. The thing about Pat is the position he was in, I think, could have been, and the positions he's been in over the years, can be a thankless job. Especially more recently, he was interacting with people that I think were probably oftentimes at their wits' end. I think the folks on the over on that side of the wall understand what it's like to deal with people when all they're looking for is for something to go right. He put himself in a position where he, I think, often could have been blamed, could have had frustrating interactions with people, but he did it every single day and was always there ready to help with a smile on his face. When constituents reach out to my office, and I think this is the same for all of you, over the last 2 years, when constituents reach out at their wits' end, needing help because society in one way or another has failed them, and probably time after time government has failed them, they came looking for help. Most of us in our own individual capacity couldn't help unless we called Pat. And Pat was always there, no matter how many people are asking for help. Pat always helped. There are literally thousands of Coloradans who have never met you, Pat, but you help them in so many ways. Pat loved this work. He loved history. He loved the promise of politics and how it can be used to improve people's lives. He loved his family. He loved baseball. But most of all, he loved helping people. If there is a heaven, I'm sure we can all agree it just got a whole lot more fun. I hope every single day up there, Pat, includes a baseball game by day and maybe a Grateful Dead concert by night. Pat, this world is better because of you. There is an enormous void with you missing from it. And the only possible way we could ever attempt to fill that void, I think, is if we all strive to be just a little bit more like Pat. To study history, and most importantly, to learn from it. To love our families unconditionally, like you obviously did. To care about the well-being of the families of others, even if we had never met them. To go to more baseball games. To listen to more Grateful Dead. And most of all, to help others and not ask for a single thing in return. Thank you for being you, Pat. We are all infinitely better because of you. To Leanne, Jade, and Chris, our hearts are with you. May Pat's memory always be a blessing. Mr. President, I think every single person in this chamber and frankly in this entire building, and then some, has so many stories that they would like to tell about Pat. We're going to make sure that we have time to tell all of those stories and honor Pat for the amazing public servant he has been for this state. If folks would like to say a few words this morning, I think that would be welcomed, but I will also say that I think we should find a time soon where we can dedicate an entire morning to honoring the legacy and work and love that we all have felt from Pat Teegarden's presence in our lives. I think the minority leader would like to say a few words, and I would request, when it's appropriate, for the chimes to be rung. Thank you, Pat. We love you.
The majority leader's moment of personal privilege is recognized. Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Also request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is becoming routine. I agree with every word that the majority leader just shared. When I served as the chairman of the Senate Business, Labor, and Technology Committee, that was when I really got to know Pat Teegarden. Different parties, same level of wanting, willingness, determination to help. As the majority leader shared, that's who Pat Teegarden was. He impressed me. And one thing that I would ask outside of these chambers to the thousands of people, especially during COVID, who experienced very challenging circumstances with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, if suddenly those things were resolved because you wrote to one of us here in the legislature, House or Senate, if suddenly hours or within 24 hours a day, someone contacted you and the problem was solved, most of the time that was because Pat Teegarden got involved. Some of you probably know that I'll respond to you in email at 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes I wake up and go back to work then. So did Pat Teegarden. There were times where I would forward an email regarding an unemployment claim to Pat. Here's another. Didn't have to explain the situation. He knew what it was. And at all hours of the night, he would respond, I'm on it. We'll take care of it. Thank you. Pat Teegarden was a great public servant, and I know that many in our society are critical of government, of bureaucrats. But Pat Teegarden offers one bright, shining example of someone who gave his life to public service and helping people, as the majority leader pointed out. It was painful to get the news from David Oppenheim in the governor's office. It was painful to learn that Pat had passed. And my immediate thought and my response back was that the Hickenlooper and the Polis administration had lost, arguably, its best. So many people will not know, did not know, and will not know how much Pat Teegarden did for them. But I'm blessed to have a little bit of insight to know. And I think all 35 of us here in the Senate do. To the Teegarden family, I cannot even begin to express how heartbroken we are at your loss. We've lost a friend and a great public servant. You've lost a husband and a father, and the world isn't the same without Pat Teegarden. Mr. Majority Leader, thank you for talking before we started this morning and understanding that we will have a moment here to recognize Pat in the future with a memorial, with all the right words. But for now, to the Teegarden family, God bless you and thank you for sharing Pat with all of us. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would also ask for a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Members, thank the Majority Leader and the Minority Leader for your comments. I met Pat when I came here years and years and years ago. And from what you both had to say, you actually crushed my ego just a little bit, because I truly felt that he cared more about me than anyone else in this chamber. And I know that he did that to all of you. And I told him maybe August, September, you know, this will be my last year here. And I'm going to do a resolution to you before I leave. Because you are the most dedicated state employee I have ever found in my 12 years here. And it hurts. It hurts that I didn't get to say my goodbyes. Last week, I sent a text. It's the only text in my 12 years that was not responded to. And then I got the word. You are a dear, dear man. You have a wonderful family. And we on earth lost a great friend. Heaven created a tremendous ally that was there on earth to make the world better for all of us. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Pat was possibly the best person in this building. In a building that often runs off of power and greed and ego, and who can get the next headline. As the Majority Leader said, he was the one for not just the thousands of people he helped, but the hundreds of thousands. We know there's people across Colorado that are protected from wage theft and getting equal pay and get their unemployment benefits because of the work he did. I was on a call with him just 10 days ago, talking about how we will make sure every Coloradan has paid family leave in 2024, and he was so excited. And as the Majority Leader said, if there's a heaven, it's a much more fun place now. And I believe religion and science exist together And so I want to share a prayer from a physicist because what Pat gave this building was always humor and a smile and the best energy. He returned every text. He was always there to greet you with solutions and no ego. So you want a physicist to speak at your funeral. You want the physicist to talk to your grieving family about the conservation of energy. So they will understand that Patrick's energy has not died. You want the physicist to remind you and those grieving about the first law of thermodynamics, that no energy gets created in the universe and none is destroyed. You want everyone to know that all of Patrick's energy, every vibration, every BTU of heat, every wave of energy and particle that he put out remains in this world. You want the physicist to tell you that everyone in the cosmos is receiving that energy still today. And at one point, you'd hope the physicists would come down to those grieving and brokenhearted and remind them that all the photons that ever bounced off of Patrick's face, all the particles whose paths were interrupted by his smile, by the touch of his hair, and hundreds of trillions of particles have raced off like children, their waves forever changed by him. And that those crying and being loved, may the physicists remind you that all those photons that bounced from him are now gathered in you and gathered in your eyes, and that those photons created within his constellation have changed neurons forever. And the physicists will remind everyone of how all of our energy is given off as heat. And there may be a few of us fanning ourselves or feeling a breeze or trying to stay warm. And this will tell you that the warmth that flowed through Patrick in his life is still here, still part of all that we are, even as we mourn and continue the heat of our own lives. Let everyone know that they can measure, that scientists have measured precisely the conservation of energy and found it accurate, verifiable, and consistent across space and time. You can hope and examine with evidence and satisfy themselves that the science is sound. We will be comforted to know that Patrick's energy is still around, according to the law of conservation of energy. But not a bit of Patrick is gone. It's just less orderly. And for someone that put so much energy and hope into this building, may we all take that energy and hope and continue the work on his behalf.
To the family, know that the Senate's thoughts and prayers are with you. As requested, the Senate will observe a moment of silence and the Senate chimes will ring. The Senate will stand in a brief recess to welcome our guests.